In the business world, the most dangerous person isn't the loudest one. It's the one who believes they're the smartest in the room, without bothering to check who's actually sitting in it. My name is Morgan Blake, and I've been a veteran employee at Alteryx Systems in Denver, Colorado for 9 years. During that time, I've witnessed the company survive a class action lawsuit, a supply chain crisis, and a brutal restructuring. But here's the interesting part. No one knows that I'm also the largest shareholder. Not even my new boss. I still remember the day I made the decision that would forever alter my trajectory at Alteryx. It was during the height of the 2020 crisis when the company was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. The stock had plummeted to historic lows, and rumors of a hostile takeover were circulating throughout the industry. I had recently inherited a substantial sum from my mother's estate, money I had originally planned to use for a quiet retirement somewhere warm, maybe starting that small business I'd always dreamed about. But something inside me couldn't bear to see Alteryx crumble, not after all the years I'd invested in building our data strategy division from the ground up. The decision wasn't impulsive. I spent 3 sleepless nights running the numbers, consulting discreetly with a financial advisor I'd known since college, and setting up a shell company, EverWest Holdings, that would shield my identity. When the dust settled, I owned 52% of Alteryx Systems, majority shareholder. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same company where I still had to request approval for basic departmental expenses was now, technically, mine. I chose to keep my ownership confidential for several reasons. First, I genuinely loved my role as head of data strategy. The intellectual challenges, the team I'd carefully assembled over the years, the satisfaction of seeing our solutions implemented across industries, these were rewards money couldn't buy. Second, I wanted to preserve the normal working relationships I'd cultivated. Being suddenly revealed as the boss would inevitably change how people interacted with me, and not necessarily for the better. Third, and perhaps most importantly, I believed I could do more good for Alteryx by understanding its inner workings from the trenches rather than from an isolated corner office. So, I continued showing up at 8:15 each morning, bringing my own lunch in a reusable container, and occasionally staying late to help junior analysts with their projects. The only people who knew my secret were my lawyer, Rita Holloway, and the financial team at EverWest Holdings. This arrangement worked perfectly for nearly 2 years, until Tyler Grantham arrived. The announcement came on a rainy Tuesday morning in March. Our previous VP of Operations had decided to take early retirement, a surprise to everyone, including me. By afternoon, an all-staff email introduced Tyler Grantham as our new executive vice president, brought in specifically to revitalize operations and streamline our approach for the competitive landscape ahead. The attached bio was impressive on paper. MBA from Wharton, former consulting experience with 2 prestigious firms in New York, and a track record of transformational leadership at his previous company. The email ended with his personal motto, radical reformation. Those 2 words should have been my first warning. Tyler made his entrance the following Monday, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps mid-30s, with the kind of confidence that immediately filled the room. His smile was practiced, revealing perfectly whitened teeth, and his handshake was firm to the point of being slightly aggressive. All hands meeting at 10 a.m., he announced within his first hour. I want everyone there, no exceptions. The conference room was packed, with junior staff standing along the walls and some joining remotely. Tyler stood at the front, sleeves rolled up in what I assumed was a calculated gesture to appear both authoritative and approachable. Let me be direct, he began, pacing slowly across the front of the room. Alteryx has been underperforming for too long. The board brought me in to change that, quickly and permanently. He clicked through a series of slides showing declining market share, competitor growth, and internal inefficiencies that, quite frankly, surprised me. Some of the data seemed selectively presented to paint a bleaker picture than what I knew to be true. We need to be leaner, faster, and unafraid to break from tradition. He continued. Some of you will find this process invigorating. Others will find it challenging. His gaze seemed to linger on some of the more tenured department heads. But make no mistake, change is coming. The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. I watched my colleagues exchange glances, some worried, others calculating how to position themselves in this new regime. As the meeting wrapped up, Tyler announced his first initiative, one-on-one meetings with all department heads over the next 2 weeks to understand the current landscape. My meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. I prepared a comprehensive overview of my department's contributions. Our data strategy had helped Alteryx weather the previous downturn. Our client retention rate was the highest in the company, and we'd pioneered several innovations that were now industry standards. I brought analysis, projections, and a strategic roadmap that I was genuinely proud of. Tyler was 20 minutes late to our meeting. He spent the first 5 minutes answering emails on his phone before finally looking up at me. "So, Morgan," he said, pronouncing my name with a slight emphasis that somehow felt dismissive. "Tell me what your team actually does here." I began my presentation, but within minutes, it was clear he wasn't truly listening. He interrupted frequently, asking questions that I had already addressed or that revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of data strategy's role in modern technology companies. "Let me stop you there," he said, holding up a hand when I was explaining our predictive analytics platform. "This all seems very academic. I'm more interested in actionable outcomes, quick wins. The board wants results this quarter, not theoretical frameworks." "These aren't theoretical," I countered, keeping my voice even. "Our analytics platform saved the Denver medical account last year when we predicted their usage pattern shift before they even recognized it themselves. That's a $4.2 million annual contract." Tyler leaned back, studying me with what seemed like mild amusement. "Interesting perspective. But moving forward, I think we need to focus on more concrete deliverables. Less analysis, more action." The meeting ended with Tyler promising to circle back after he'd completed his review of all departments. As I gathered my materials, he added, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, and we're implementing new approval protocols for all client-facing communications. Everything goes through my office first." That evening, I stayed late, reviewing the company bylaws and recent board minutes through my secure EverWest portal. Nothing indicated that the board had mandated the sweeping changes Tyler was suggesting. In fact, the most recent quarterly report showed stronger performance than he had presented in his all-hands meeting. Something didn't add up. Over the next 3 weeks, Tyler's radical reformation began taking shape. First came the reorganization announcements. 3 department heads, all with the company for over 5 years, were abruptly reassigned to special projects, effectively sidelined. Their replacements were quickly announced. 2 external hires who had worked with Tyler at his previous company, and 1 internal promotion of a relatively new employee who had enthusiastically endorsed Tyler's vision during the all-hands. The atmosphere at Alteryx grew increasingly tense. Whispered conversations stopped when Tyler or his new lieutenants walked by. People began working longer hours, not out of dedication, but fear. Emergency meetings became common, often scheduled late in the day with mandatory attendance. My own position grew more precarious by the day. Tyler began excluding me from meetings where data strategy had always been represented. My team's projects were deprioritized, our budget requests delayed or denied. When I managed to secure time on Tyler's calendar to discuss these issues, he would invariably reschedule at the last minute. One particularly frustrating incident occurred when I learned, through a junior analyst on my team, that Tyler had presented one of our data models to a major client as his own initiative. When I confronted him privately about this, his response was chilling in its casualness. "Morgan, I think you're missing the bigger picture here," he said, not bothering to look up from his computer. "Individual credit isn't important. What matters is that Alteryx presents a unified front to our clients. Besides, your model needed significant refinement before it was client-ready." "Refinement?" I echoed, struggling to maintain my composure. "Tyler, my team spent 6 months developing and testing that model. The client specifically requested our approach based on previous work we'd done." He finally looked up. fixing me with a stare that was both dismissive and challenging. Look, I appreciate your passion, but this is business. Sometimes the person in the room needs to make executive decisions without getting everyone's sign-off. I'm sure you understand. I left his office seething, but careful not to show it. That night, I called Rita for the first time in months. He doesn't know, does he? She asked after listening to my account of the past few weeks. About EverWest? No, I'm certain he has no idea. The board knows the majority shareholder is EverWest Holdings, but only the board chair knows that's me, and he's bound by confidentiality. Interesting situation, Rita mused. What's your read on Grantham's endgame here? I'm not entirely sure, I admitted. Initially, I thought he was just another corporate climber brought in to make quick, visible changes he could claim as victories before moving on to his next opportunity. But there's something more methodical about how he's dismantling certain parts of the company while elevating others. Keep documenting everything, Rita advised. And maybe we should schedule a review of your options as majority shareholder, just in case. I agreed, but still hoped the situation might improve without requiring drastic measures. That hope evaporated the following Tuesday. I arrived at work to find my security badge had been deactivated. After a humiliating wait in the lobby, a nervous HR representative escorted me to a small conference room where Tyler sat with one of his newly appointed directors. Morgan, thank you for coming in, he began, as if I had a choice. I'll get right to the point. As part of our ongoing restructuring, we've been evaluating all departments for alignment with our new strategic direction. I sat perfectly still, already knowing what was coming. Unfortunately, we've determined that the current data strategy approach doesn't align with our vision moving forward. We'll be absorbing those functions into the broader technical operations team. And my position? I asked, though the answer was obvious. Will be eliminated, effective immediately. Tyler slid a folder across the table. Here's the severance package. It's generous. 6 months' salary, extended benefits, and outplacement services. HR will assist with the transition. The HR representative looked distinctly uncomfortable. We'll need your company devices and any other Alteryx property returned today, she added softly. Of course, I replied, my voice remarkably steady despite the anger building inside me. May I have a moment to inform my team personally? Tyler shook his head. That won't be necessary. We've scheduled a department meeting for later this morning. Change is always challenging, but it's important we manage the narrative appropriately. Manage the narrative. As if my 9 years of building and leading the data strategy team could be reduced to a convenient corporate storyline. I stood up, gathering my personal items. I understand. Is there anything else? Tyler seemed slightly taken aback by my calm acceptance. He had likely expected tears, protests, or anger. Reactions that would have reinforced his decision and given him the moral high ground. No, that's all, he said, already turning his attention to his phone. HR will walk you through the rest of the process. As I was escorted to my desk to collect my belongings, I maintained a dignified silence. Colleagues watched with shocked expressions as I packed 9 years of professional life into a cardboard box. Some approached tentatively, offering whispered support and promises to stay in touch. Others kept their distance, fearful of being associated with someone who had clearly fallen from grace. When I reached the lobby, I turned to the HR representative. Could you please ensure that Rita Holloway in legal receives a copy of my termination documentation? It's for my personal records. The woman nodded, clearly relieved that I wasn't causing a scene. Of course, Ms. Blake. I'll see to it personally. I walked to my car with measured steps, placed the box carefully in the trunk, and drove home without a single tear or curse. The time for emotional reactions would come later. For now, I needed clarity and strategy. At home, I poured myself a glass of the expensive scotch I saved for special occasions, opened my personal laptop, and logged into the secure EverWest Holdings portal. As the majority shareholder, I had access to information Tyler likely assumed I'd never see again. Upcoming board meetings, internal communications about the restructuring, and the true financial projections that differed significantly from what he'd presented to the staff. The next board meeting was scheduled for Monday, less than a week away. The agenda included Tyler's comprehensive restructuring plan and, interestingly, a proposal to dissolve several underperforming divisions completely. I'd bet my entire ownership stake that data strategy was on that list. I spent the next hour reviewing the company bylaws regarding shareholder authority and board voting procedures. Then I called Rita. "They actually fired you?" she asked, her usual professional calm giving way to genuine surprise. "Effective immediately," I confirmed, "with a generous severance package that's contingent on a non-disclosure agreement, naturally. Have you signed anything?" "Not a word. I wanted to speak with you first." "Good," Rita said. "Don't sign anything yet. The board meeting on Monday. Are you planning to attend?" "That's exactly why I'm calling. As the majority shareholder, I have every right to be there. But I'm wondering about timing." Rita was silent for a moment, thinking. Tyler has clearly been operating under the assumption that the board will rubber stamp his decisions. He's probably never bothered to ask who actually controls EverWest Holdings. "The board chair is the only one who knows it's me," I reminded her. "And we've had an understanding about maintaining that confidentiality, which has served its purpose until now," Rita pointed out. "But circumstances have changed. I think it's time for Morgan Blake, data strategy head, to step aside and let Morgan Blake, majority shareholder, take center stage." We spent the next hour crafting a strategy for Monday's meeting. By the time we finished, I felt a calm resolve replacing the anger and shock of the morning. Tyler had made a critical error. He'd eliminated the person he perceived as a threat without ever understanding who he was truly dealing with. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I gathered performance data for my department, documented every instance of Tyler's misleading presentations and strategic missteps, and prepared a concise but comprehensive case for why his radical reformation was damaging Altrix's core strengths. Rita helped me refine the presentation and advised on the legal aspects of my approach. By Monday morning, I was ready. I chose my outfit carefully. A charcoal gray suit that conveyed authority without ostentation, accessorized with the platinum necklace my mother had left me, a small talisman of strength for what lay ahead. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Altrix headquarters. I arrived at 9:30, my EverWest Holdings credentials ensuring I bypassed the regular security protocols that would have flagged my recently terminated employee status. The receptionist, who knew me from my years at the company, looked confused but didn't question my presence when I explained I was there for the board meeting. I waited in a small side room, reviewing my notes one final time. At 9:55, Rita arrived, impeccably professional in a navy suit, carrying a leather portfolio containing all the documentation we might need. We exchanged a brief, determined nod. "Ready?" she asked. "More than ready," I replied. We entered the boardroom just as the members were taking their seats. 8 people sat around the polished mahogany table, 6 board members, Tyler, and his chief financial officer. The conversation died immediately as they registered my presence. Tyler recovered first, his expression shifting from shock to controlled irritation. "Morgan, this is a closed board meeting. There must be some misunderstanding." The board chair, William Harrington, looked distinctly uncomfortable. He knew exactly who I was and why I was there, but had clearly not expected me to assert my shareholder rights so directly. "Actually," I said calmly, "there's no misunderstanding. I'm here representing EverWest Holdings." A flicker of confusion crossed Tyler's face. "EverWest? The majority shareholder?" "Precisely." I placed my portfolio on the table and took a seat at the far end, directly opposite Tyler. "Please, don't let me interrupt. I believe you were about to present your restructuring plan." Tyler glanced at William, who cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps we should begin with introductions for those who haven't met Ms. Blake in her capacity as EverWest's representative." "Of course." I smiled slightly, though I believe most of you know me as the head of data strategy, or rather, former head, as of last Tuesday. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Board members exchanged glances, some confused, others beginning to understand the implications. Tyler's face had hardened into a mask of professional control, but I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. "I wasn't aware that you had connections to EverWest Holdings," he said carefully. "Not connections, Mr. Grantham," Rita interjected smoothly. "Ms. Blake is EverWest Holdings. She's the majority shareholder of Alteryx Systems, holding 52% of voting shares." The silence that followed was absolute. Tyler's confident facade cracked momentarily, revealing genuine shock before he composed himself. "I see," he said finally. "This is unexpected." "I imagine so," I replied, "especially given recent decisions regarding the data strategy division. But please, continue with your presentation. The board should hear your complete vision before we move to any discussion." Tyler hesitated, then nodded stiffly. He stood and began his carefully rehearsed presentation, but the confident swagger from previous weeks had diminished considerably. He outlined his restructuring plan, emphasizing cost savings and operational efficiencies, positioning the elimination of redundant divisions, including data strategy, as necessary sacrifices for future growth. I listened attentively, taking occasional notes but otherwise remaining impassive. When he finished, William turned to me. "Ms. Blake, as majority shareholder, do you have any questions or concerns about Mr. Grantham's proposal?" "Several," I said, opening my portfolio. "First, I'd like to address the financial projections Mr. Grantham has presented. They differ significantly from the actual performance data." I distributed copies of my analysis, which clearly showed how Tyler had selectively presented information to support his narrative of a company in crisis. Second, the elimination of the data strategy division represents not just a loss of institutional knowledge, but a direct competitive disadvantage. Our top 3 clients, representing nearly $30 million in annual revenue, specifically contracted with Alteryx because of our data strategy capabilities. I proceeded methodically through each point, highlighting how Tyler's radical reformation was actually dismantling Alteryx's core strengths while empowering his hand-picked team. Throughout my presentation, Tyler's expression grew increasingly rigid. When I finished, William looked grave. "These are serious concerns, Ms. Blake. Mr. Grantham, would you care to respond?" Tyler leaned forward, his knuckles white against the polished table. "With all due respect, Ms. Blake's perspective is understandably biased, given her personal stake in the data strategy division. My restructuring plan is based on objective analysis of where Alteryx needs to position itself for future growth. Sometimes difficult decisions are necessary for the greater good of the company." "Objective analysis?" I echoed. "Like the selective data you presented to justify eliminating experienced department heads? Or perhaps you're referring to the altered client satisfaction metrics that conveniently downplayed the value of the very divisions you wanted to cut." I slid another document across the table, a comparison of Tyler's presented metrics against the actual internal numbers. "The board deserves accurate information, Mr. Grantham, not a narrative crafted to justify decisions you'd already made before you even understood our business." Tyler's composure finally cracked. "You're questioning my professional integrity based on what? Resentment over a necessary business decision? This is exactly why emotional attachments to departments or roles can't dictate corporate strategy." "This isn't about emotion," I replied evenly. "It's about facts. Facts you deliberately misrepresented. Facts that directly contradict the necessary business decisions you've been making." I turned to address the entire board. "The issue isn't that I was terminated. The issue is that Mr. Grantham has been systematically removing experienced leaders and replacing them with his own associates, based on misleading information and without proper understanding of Alteryx's core business model." William cleared his throat. "Given these concerns, I believe we should pause implementation of the restructuring plan pending further review. Mr. Grantham, please prepare a detailed response to Ms. Blake's analysis for our consideration." Tyler's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, delaying now will compromise the momentum we've built. The market won't wait for us to resolve internal disagreements. This isn't an internal disagreement, Rita interjected smoothly. This is the majority shareholder expressing fundamental concerns about the direction of the company she owns. Standard corporate governance requires full consideration of these concerns. William nodded. Ms. Holloway is correct. Additionally, given the circumstances, I believe it would be appropriate to temporarily suspend Mr. Grantham's authority regarding further organizational changes until this matter is resolved. Tyler stood abruptly. This is unprecedented. I was brought in with a clear mandate to transform this company. A mandate based on incomplete information, I countered. The board never knew that you planned to systematically dismantle our most valuable divisions, or that your presentation of Altrix's challenges was selectively curated to justify your predetermined solutions. I looked directly at Tyler. The problem isn't that I lacked value to this company. The problem is that you never bothered to discover who actually had the power to challenge your vision. The room fell silent. After a long moment, William spoke again. In light of these revelations, I propose we adjourn to consider next steps. Mr. Grantham, please remain available for further discussion. Ms. Blake, as majority shareholder, your input will be essential in determining how we proceed. As the meeting broke up, Tyler approached me, his voice low and tense. This isn't over, Morgan. You've made this personal. But business isn't personal. I met his gaze steadily. On the contrary, Mr. Grantham, for the people whose careers and livelihoods you've disrupted based on false pretenses, this is very personal. And for me, protecting the company I've helped build for 9 years is both personal and professional. The difference is, I now have the authority to do something about it. I walked away, leaving him standing there. Rita joined me in the hallway, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Well played, she murmured. What's your next move? First, I need to understand the full extent of the damage, I replied. How many other talented people has he pushed out? What projects have been derailed? Then we rebuild, the right way. The next 24 hours brought a flurry of activity. William called an emergency executive session that afternoon, excluding Tyler. By evening, the decision was unanimous. Tyler would be suspended, pending a full investigation into his management practices and the accuracy of his reporting to the board. When I returned to my office the following morning, my access credentials fully restored, I found dozens of emails waiting for me. Word had spread quickly that something significant had happened with Tyler's radical reformation, though the details remained confidential. Most touching were the messages from colleagues across different departments. People I'd worked with over the years who expressed relief that someone had finally challenged Tyler's approach. Several described similar experiences of being sidelined, their expertise dismissed, their concerns ignored. The pattern was clear. Tyler had been systematically removing anyone he perceived as a potential obstacle, regardless of their value to Altrix. I spent that day meeting with department heads, both those who remained and those who had been reassigned to special projects. Together, we began mapping out a recovery plan, identifying priorities that had been neglected and relationships that needed repair. By week's end, we had established an anonymous feedback channel for employees to report concerns or suggestions, a direct repudiation of Tyler's top-down approach. The response was overwhelming, hundreds of submissions within the first 48 hours, many containing valuable insights that would have never reached leadership under Tyler's regime. Tyler, meanwhile, was not going quietly. He had hired external counsel and was positioning himself as the victim of entrenched interests resistant to necessary change. He sent a company-wide email, against explicit instructions from the board, framing the situation as a power struggle that would ultimately damage Altrix's future. Some leaders prioritize personal control over company progress. He wrote, "My only goal has been to position Altrix for success in a changing marketplace, even when that meant making difficult decisions that not everyone understood or appreciated." The email concluded with a thinly veiled critique of my leadership. True innovation requires courage to break from comfortable patterns, something rarely found in those who have grown too accustomed to the status quo. Rather than responding directly, I focused on actions. We reinstated key projects that Tyler had deprioritized, reconnected with clients who had expressed concerns about the direction under his leadership, and began the process of inviting back valuable team members who had been pushed out. 2 weeks after the initial board confrontation, we held a second meeting to determine Tyler's fate. This time, I came armed not just with financial and performance data, but with a comprehensive dossier documenting his pattern of manipulation, altered meeting minutes, selective reporting, strategic isolation of experienced leaders, and replacement with loyal associates regardless of qualifications. Rita had helped compile statements from employees across the organization, creating a damning picture of a leader who ruled through intimidation rather than inspiration, who valued loyalty above competence, and who was willing to sacrifice long-term stability for short-term appearances of success. Tyler arrived with his attorney, his demeanor oscillating between defensive and dismissive. When presented with the evidence, he attempted to frame it as a matter of different management philosophies. Every leader faces resistance when implementing necessary change, he argued. What's being characterized as manipulation was simply direct action in a company that had grown too comfortable with consensus-based decision-making. Mr. Grantham, one board member countered, altering performance metrics to justify terminating experienced employees isn't a management philosophy. It's ethical misconduct. The deliberation was shorter this time. Tyler's suspension became permanent termination, with no severance package and a carefully worded statement that would make it difficult for him to simply move on to his next corporate transformation without accountability. As the board prepared to adjourn, Tyler lost the last remnants of his professional composure. "You have no idea what you're doing," he said, voice rising. "I built a reputation turning companies like this around. You think you can just erase that? You think this ends here?" I regarded him calmly. "Mr. Grantham, you didn't build anything at Alteryx. In fact, you nearly destroyed what others had spent years creating. The difference between us isn't just our approach to leadership, it's that I understand the value of what exists before presuming to change it." Tyler stood, gathering his papers with jerky movements. "This company will regret this decision. All of you will." "Perhaps," I replied. "But I suspect the only regret will be that we didn't recognize the damage you were causing sooner." After Tyler and his attorney left, William turned to me. "Morgan, the board would like to offer you a formal position as Chief Strategy Officer. Your insights during this crisis have demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership Alteryx needs moving forward." The offer was tempting, but I had been considering a different approach. "I appreciate the offer, William, but I believe my effectiveness comes partly from understanding Alteryx at every level. I'd prefer to return to leading the data strategy division, with expanded authority to implement the changes we've discussed." William looked surprised. "You're turning down a C-suite position?" "I'm prioritizing impact over title," I clarified. "But I do have one condition: a complete revision of our corporate culture, starting with transparent communication, equitable recognition of contributions, and systematic checks against the kind of power consolidation that allowed this situation to develop." The board unanimously approved my proposal. Over the following months, we implemented changes that transformed not just our organizational structure, but our entire approach to leadership. The anonymous feedback channel became a permanent fixture, evolving into a robust system for surfacing ideas and concerns from every level of the company. We dismantled the hierarchical decision-making model Tyler had implemented, replacing it with collaborative frameworks that valued expertise over authority. Department heads were empowered to advocate for their teams, with clear paths for escalating concerns when necessary. Most importantly, we established transparency as a core value, not just in communications, but in how performance was measured, how decisions were made, and how credit was assigned. No more selective data presentation, no more isolated power centers, no more fear of speaking truth to power. 6 months after Tyler's departure, Alteryx was thriving. Our client retention rate had reached an all-time high. Employee satisfaction scores had rebounded dramatically, and our market position was stronger than ever. The radical reformation had indeed occurred, just not in the way Tyler had envisioned. As for me, I continued to lead the data strategy division while participating in strategic decisions as the majority shareholder. I no longer kept my ownership a secret, though I was careful to maintain appropriate boundaries between my operational role and my shareholder authority. The experience changed me as a leader. I became more attentive to power dynamics, more proactive in creating space for diverse perspectives, and more vigilant against the kind of cultural erosion that can happen when ambition replaces integrity at the top. 1 year to the day after Tyler's termination, I received an email from a former colleague now working at a company where Tyler had recently been hired as a transformation consultant. The message was brief but telling. Tyler was implementing the same playbook, starting with selective reporting and strategic isolation of established leaders. I considered my response carefully before writing back with the lessons we had learned at Alteryx. Document everything, build coalitions across departments, and never underestimate the importance of transparently shared information. The most effective resistance to manipulation, I concluded, is a culture where truth is valued above confidence and where no one believes they're too powerful to be held accountable. Looking back now, I realized that Tyler did teach me something valuable, though not what he intended. He showed me that true leadership isn't about being the loudest or most confident voice in the room. It's about understanding the ecosystem you're part of, respecting the contributions of others, and recognizing that sustainable success comes not from dramatic disruption, but from thoughtful evolution. I don't need to raise my voice to prove I have power. I just need to show them who they can't discard. And this time, I'm not just protecting myself, I'm protecting everyone who's ever been silenced.